Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Not for sale.
It is not a permission to sell it commercially or provide it on an open market.
The Prime Minister says a BC company cannot sell cocaine to you, but it can produce it. Plus, managing avalanche risks.
I think we need to understand that also people voluntarily participate in these activities, and it's their choice.
As we learn more about the latest victims in BC. And shocked dogs.
I threw myself down onto the ground and then I could feel electricity.
A warning for pet lovers after several animals get electrocuted.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Anita is away tonight. A BC cannabis company is under fire after announcing it had gotten a license to produce and sell cocaine. The Prime Minister and other politicians are accusing the company of publishing misleading information. As John Hernandez tells us, the company can make the drug, but only for research.
I find it more than a little bit frustrating.
It's been a confusing week for BC's Premier, who claims Ottawa went over his head.
We're going to get answers for British Columbians from Health Canada.
The saga started last week when BC cannabis producer Adastra Labs issued a questionable press release. It appeared to suggest the company had Health Canada approval to legally possess, produce, sell, and distribute cocaine on the open market, a move that left BC's Premier stunned.
The short answer is that I was astonished by this announcement.
Today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau offered some much-needed clarity, noting the company will only be able to produce and sell for research purposes.
It is not a permission to sell it commercially or provide it on an open market. We are working very quickly with this company to correct the misunderstanding that their press release has caused.
The company then issued a retraction confirming Trudeau's remarks, the whole ordeal leaving the BC Premier perplexed once again.
I think that Health Canada needs to have a serious look at what they're doing. I think they have to have a serious look at this company and the license they've issued to a company that would issue an irresponsible press release like this.
Despite all the confusion, Adastra Labs has seen its share prices surge, rising from 70 cents to $1.33 this week alone. Securities experts say the company's original vague announcement was likely an attempt to drive investment.
It is common practice for small cap companies to use scintillating language to get investors interested in trading their stock.
While controversial, substance use researchers say Adastra Labs' cocaine license is notable for being one of the first of its kind, and it could be part of a growing movement toward a safer supply of the drug.
As we explore different alternatives to get people access to a regulated and predictable drug supply, there's going to be a need for sourcing out those substances.
But there's no guarantees this company will be the one to usher in the change. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
We have an update now on the deadly avalanche near Invermere. CBC News has confirmed the 3 men killed were German citizens. While the risk of avalanches in the area remains high, Avalanche Canada says it has no intention to regulate access to the provincial backcountry. The CBC's Belle Puri has a closer look at the dangers and what it's like to live through an avalanche.
3, 2, 1, dropping. Yeah, buddy.
The thrill of skiing BC's backcountry is as legendary as it is unpredictable.
Ooh. Oh, tomahawk, avalanche, avalanche.
This footage, taken as an unexpected wall of snow thunders down a mountain, was captured by a film crew out to shoot a promotional video.
I just remember being under with snow getting shoved down my throat.
So far, this winter, a dozen people have died in BC backcountry avalanches.
Our operators are being super conservative. They're not skiing terrain that they would normally ski. You know, even with that, we're seeing avalanches that are moving in fairly low gradient terrain.
Heliski operators say it's impossible to eliminate 100% of the risk.
Every guest wears a pack with a probe, shovel, and also has a radio in the pack.
Avalanche Canada issues condition bulletins twice a day.
Yes, 12 is a number. It's 12 too many. But let's not overreact here and close the backcountry because we think it's going to fix the problem. I think we need to understand that also people voluntarily participate in these activities, and it's their choice.
You all right?
The video is now used to bring awareness about avalanche risk in the backcountry.
It was a big avalanche, but it wasn't a huge avalanche. But if it pushes you into something, that can be enough to really injure you or kill you. So
I was able to move my head and my arm was kind of here. I was able to go like this, kind of move snow across my face and push my head out just so I could see the sky. And I saw the sky and I was like, I could have cried. You just never expect it to really happen.
Backcountry enthusiasts say that's part of the thrill. Going into the mountains, you never know what's going to happen. Belle Puri, CBC News, Vancouver.
Heads up if you are planning to travel to or from the BC interior this weekend. The Coquihalla Highway is closed until at least tomorrow afternoon between Hope and Merritt after more than 2 feet of snow fell. This was the view along the highway throughout the day. The Ministry of Transportation says it's planning avalanche control along the stretch tomorrow morning if the weather allows. Maintenance crews and equipment will then try to clear the coke to try to reopen it. You can still use highways 1 and 3. We are expecting more snow. Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe is here to tell us where it's going to go, Joe.
Yeah, the south coast in for another snowy night. That goes for the Coquihalla and parts of Metro Vancouver. It's all thanks to this swirling low sitting off our north coast. That southwesterly flow as the winds wrap around that low, bringing the moisture once again into the south coast. This has been our story all week, these swirling lows bringing nighttime snow. This time through the overnight and Saturday morning, snowfall warnings just for the North Shore out towards Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam, Maple Ridge, Pitt Meadows. That's where we could be looking at 5 to 10 centimeters by Saturday afternoon. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a trace to a couple centimeters across the rest of Metro Vancouver, really just looking to get away snow-free right down towards the water. So taking a look at that snowfall accumulation over the next 24 hours, the darker the blues, the higher the totals. North Shore Mountains looking to get 10 to 20 centimeters. Fresh storm snow for parts of the Coquihalla. This is the third night you've seen that snow. And again, snow right across Metro Vancouver. So Dan, it has been quite the week for snow events, and we're not quite out of the woods yet. I'll take you through the long range coming up.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
Weather news now. 3 men were taken to hospital last night after what Vancouver police call a triple stabbing in the entertainment district. Officers say 3 men in their 20s got into some sort of argument that turned very violent. All 3 were stabbed and taken to hospital. They are expected to survive. It happened near Nelson and Granville. The 3 men did know each other. Anyone with information or who saw what happened is asked to contact police. The province has announced $250 million to upgrade the Iona wastewater treatment plant in Richmond.
750,000 Metro Vancouver residents, including me and my family, and probably many of the people that are here in this room today. We can be honest that wastewater doesn't necessarily grab headlines unless things go wrong. It is something that we rely on without necessarily it being front of mind. Every time we take a shower, every time we flush a toilet, our wastewater needs to be treated before it's released back into waterways.
The upgrades will accommodate the growing volume of wastewater as Metro Vancouver's population also inches up. The money covers a third of the first phase of the project. The province says the goal is to make the facility more resilient to earthquakes, climate change, and rising sea levels. We have a warning for Metro Vancouver dog lovers after 2 animals were recently electrocuted on city sidewalks. As Yasmin Gandam shows us, engineers say the snow and the salt can increase the chance of a shock.
I mean, it was just the most traumatic thing I've ever seen.
Teresa Bouchard is the proud parent of Benny, a 5-year-old, almost 200-pound Leon Berger pump. But she was terrified when he started yelping and thrashing after being electrocuted on the sidewalk last Saturday night in West Vancouver.
So I threw myself down onto the ground, and then I could feel electricity. Some kind of electrical thing happening, and I thought maybe it was related to the salt.
Park Royal says electricians found the cause to be a broken ground wire. They say it's now been repaired. But this electrical engineer says salt and snow pose an increased risk to animals as they act as perfect electricity conductors.
Lots of water there. and people sprinkling salt everywhere. So that can increase the probability, and if there was a ground fault, what could happen is the pet experiences the energy from that ground fault, and those incidents happen.
The mall has offered to pay Benny's vet bills, but his ordeal is not unique. 3-year-old Titan was shocked after stepping on the metal cover of an underground junction box in downtown Vancouver Tuesday.
It was mayhem. It was a freak accident.
Titan was out for a walk with a friend at the time.
And I just kept thinking, oh my God, Lindsay is like waiting for her dog, and I can't imagine, this, like, please don't die.
Titan survived, but it came with a $1,000 vet bill. City staff say they identified old wiring as the cause and have fixed the fault, but other dog lovers are worried.
There were some pylons and some tape around it, and then I went back the next day and it was all taken down. So it's just, and there's dirt put over the metal grate, or the metal plate on the ground, and the dirt's all gone now too.
And Bouchard is urging pet parents to be very careful.
So tragic. You don't want to see it ever again.
You're advised to keep your animals away from metal grates and have them wear boots when possible. Yasmin Gandam, CBC News, Vancouver.
There's a live shot of the North Shore and Cypress Mountain tonight, where yesterday emergency crews were deployed to help save a backcountry skier. North Shore Rescue says the skier was on the backside of Mount Strachan when he got caught in a small slough and pushed into a tree, breaking his leg. Crews managed to pull him out by air. A second call happened later in the day for a missing snowboarder. She was eventually found and hiked out with crews using snowshoes. Vancouver physician and trauma expert Dr. Gabor Mate is going to sit down with Prince Harry tomorrow for a live-streamed conversation about childhood trauma and healing. Mate spoke with CBC's Gloria Makarenko about what the prince is going through.
What I'm interested in is the life experience of a human being, and he was a traumatized child. This was a very dysfunctional family. That's not news to anybody who's read his book or watched The Crown or knows anything about the life history of Harry and his brother William. So for me, the interest is what happens to human beings when, from the beginning of their lives, they're put under stress and continue to live under stress, and how do they heal from the impacts of that? The real issue here is, and I think a genuinely inspiring aspect of his book is, here's a human being who's trying to break out of the role that was thrust into in order to actually become himself. And that's fairly common in life. You don't have to be royalty to be seen by your family as fulfilling a certain role, meeting certain expectations, without regard to who you really are as an individual human being.
Rugby fans are rejoicing this weekend in BC. The annual Sevens tournament kicked off in Vancouver today. For the first time, the women's event is under the same roof. As Joe Ballard reports, athletes hope it's a step toward equity.
Welcome to the pitch, Team Ireland.
Rugby Sevens is back in its usual hard-hitting fashion. And this year, the women are sharing center stage.
It is the way the series is moving forward. All of the events will be equitable. 12 men's teams, 12 women's teams.
For years, a separate, smaller tournament was held on Vancouver Island for the women. A popular event, but there was less exposure than at BC Place, where roughly 70,000 fans normally show up.
Yeah, I think it's a really great representation of, the growth of Rugby Sevens and the equality of men's and women's sports internationally.
Looking at the crowd, you may notice the average age of the fans is trending a little younger than usual. Around 7,000 school-aged kids were invited for the first half of Friday's tournament for free.
And who knows who we've got sitting in the stands. Maybe in a few years' time, we've got the next men or women's Sevens national team players sitting up there.
The first match of the event for the Canadians didn't go exactly as planned, but it wasn't without its highlights.
Canada with a real chance down the left edge. Outstanding play, and what a finish for Wardley.
For this try scorer, the significance of this level of exposure in front of this audience isn't lost on her.
When I was growing up, I didn't really have that much rugby to look up to. It's definitely a pathstone for
grassroots rugby to get involved and for them to, look up to us to want to play rugby.
Still, some say rugby has a long way to go to reach true gender equity, like paying all of the players on the women's 15s team.
That is a big gap in our sports system in Canada, is how can we pay all women to compete competitively, not just the 7s program, but our 15s program as well.
Over the 3-day weekend, teams from around the world will duke it out for the top spot. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Vancouver.
To another big celebration now. After 2 years of pandemic cancellations, Hobiyee has returned to the PNE. Their traditional Nishka events celebrating the new year, marking tradition and a new season of the harvest. Thousands of people are expected at the event tonight, and that is where we find our Wamish Hamilton. Wamish, we know it's loud there. What is happening, and what about the significance of this celebration?
We're here at the PNE Forum, where it's absolutely jam-packed with Indigenous people, literally to the rafters. It's a beautiful thing. We're here to mark the first Hobiyee since the pandemic started 3 years ago. Hobiyee marks the crescent moon, the last crescent moon in the month of February. When you look up, if the crescent moon is open, that means that the coming year's harvest is going to be good. If it's not open, not so much is going to be good. The Granddaddy of Hobiyees was celebrated last weekend in the Nass Valley, where it rotates amongst the 4 Nisga'a nations every year. Here in Vancouver, they celebrate what I refer to as the mother of all Hobiyees because it's so big. And it involves so many different First Nations. There's up to 15 different First Nations that are giving culture performances here tonight and tomorrow. What we're hearing now are the drums, and if it sounds like thunderclaps, pretty close. It's the grand entry of all the singers and dancers, all 500 singers and dancers that'll be performing this weekend. In fact, this morning, this isn't just a celebration for adults. This morning, there was a group of children from various elementary schools throughout the Lower Mainland that took this occasion and used Hobiyee as a teaching tool to understand Nisga'a people and culture.
I'm really excited and everything because every year it always made me just feel good, and the energy it's just a nice energy, like hearing everybody sing, dance, seeing everybody in our culture have fun and whatnot. So yeah, I'm really excited.
Look around, it's really nice. And you get to see it up in person, and it's really nice and beautiful. You get to see people dance, you get to go up and dance, do more things. You get to participate in dancing, drum, all those types of things, yeah.
It's a lot to me to be here because I've always grown up around potlucks and powwows, and to be here means a lot to me. And I've gotten to not only speak to my Creator, my God, before I got here, but He's also told me that I am on the right path.
Hobiyee goes tonight till 10 o'clock. It opens again tomorrow morning at 10, where you'll see culture performances from such varied groups as a group from Seattle, 2 from Vancouver Island, here in the Lower Mainland, and of course, the local Urban Nisga'a Association.
Wamish Hamilton reporting
you can
live.
Make it here. Yeah. If you can't, CFNR is streaming it online.
Wonderful. Wamish Hamilton live at Hobiyee at the PNE Forum. Fabulous event. Wamish, thank you very much. The dangers of avalanches. We hear from one mother whose child was killed by a slide in 2003. What changed back then and her concerns today? That story's next. Hello to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream tonight. Great to have you here. It started as a personal challenge. Every day in November, a New Brunswick woman went out for a swim in a lake or river. Yes, November. Some days she'd swim alone. Other days, a few brave souls would join her. As time went on, though, she kept going, wading through the icy waters every other day.
name is Jenny Spinney, and I've been jumping in cold water for the last few months. I come to the lake or wherever I can find open water and submerge myself for up to 10 minutes to feel good, as strange as it sounds. I prefer to do it alone. It is very peaceful. As strange as that sounds, I usually will face like the woods if I can and just, I don't know, it's really hard to explain, but it's a very peaceful feeling once you just relax and are calm and you just focus on one thing. You're in the water and you're focused on that. Morning swims, even though like I hadn't eaten, and I don't know if it's because I was rested or what, but my morning swims, I found I could stay in longer. I used to time them all, just it was interesting, right? Now I just kind of go till I'm like, okay, I feel a little cold, I'll get out. You know, I'm sure it looks ridiculous, but it until you've done it. And like I got off work at 4 and came here, and you know, I had the busyness of the day in my head and rush. Right now, I just feel amazing. And that's what I have to do to get there.
This week's deadly avalanche near Invermere is certainly resonating with many people. And again, it's raising concerns about dangerous conditions in the backcountry. 12 people have now been killed by slides in BC so far this year. Forecasters have compared conditions to 2003, when 25 people were killed. Among them, 7 Calgary area teenagers who died in a slide in Glacier National Park near Revelstoke. That prompted Parks Canada to ban school groups from some trails, led to new danger rating systems, and the creation of Avalanche Canada. Among those 7 victims from 2003 was 15-year-old Daniel Arato. His mother says the latest deaths in Invermere this year raise worries about backcountry use and safety. Judith Arato joins us now from Fernie, BC. Judith, the circumstances of these latest deaths somewhat different than your son's death. The victims here were with a heli skiing company. But what are your main concerns after what happened?
I think my concerns were that when I was listening to an interview that was being given yesterday, that the operators of the heli skiing, the representatives of the heli skiing company, basically said that, they're operating with mountain guides, they are professionals, that the clients are trained in search and rescue. He rattled off some statistics about the number of deaths that happen. He seemed to suggest these were acceptable. And which is, I think, very typical, is that they blame the conditions. And, they talk about the fact that the risks can't be fully eliminated. And it was sort of shocking for me to hear him make those sound bites, because those were the same sound bites that we heard 20 years ago. They were the same excuses that were given, too bad, so sad, wrong place, wrong time. We challenged that thinking and we said, okay, I guess 7 children should lose their lives every year in the park because that's okay.
We're hearing from Helicat Canada saying their operators right now are being super conservative. They're not skiing in terrain they would normally ski. They're seeing avalanches in areas in what they call fairly low gradient terrain. And even Avalanche Canada is saying 12 number of people killed this year is too many, but let's not overreact here and close the backcountry because we think it's going to fix the problem. Do you think there is a practical fix for this beyond just saying we've got to shut down the backcountry? Because from all indications, that's not going to happen.
I think that there's a lot that has to change. I think their culture of safety has to change. I think this assumption that the mountain guides are infallible and that you can predict avalanches, which you cannot. I mean, there's some level of science involved, but it's maybe 50%. The other 50% is totally unknown. I think that they are continuing to ignore the fact that they need to change. There's significant change that has to happen in their culture, in their systems, in their process, and in their people.
Lastly, Judith, do you think it's time then for government, some sort of regulatory body to end the self-managing of the heli-skiing industry? Like, what do you think it's going to take practically?
Well, the heli-skiing industry is not isolated, right? There's a whole ecosystem of backcountry services providers. There's the mountain guiding community, there are the lodges, there's obviously the heli-skiing. I think all of them together form an ecosystem, and I do think that it's time that there is some regulatory body that looks to manage the safety performance of these operators, because I don't think they're doing a good enough job on their own. I mean, I'm pleased to say that in the last 20 years, since all the changes happened in 2003, targeted specifically, to a large extent, to the custodial groups, to children, that no child has lost their lives in the backcountry. So it's been 20 years since it's been a loss of life of a child. And so I just don't understand why that can't happen as well for consenting adults. Like, that's the part that doesn't make sense to me.
Judith Arado, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
You are very welcome.
A migrant trafficking ring in Toronto. Police break up a criminal outfit using migrants for labor. That story's coming up.
Friday night at the Chan Centre. A sold-out show and an expectant crowd.
These are two of the greatest musicians for jazz that are still living, you know. Incredibly historical figures in jazz music, so hearing them play together will be a very special evening.
It's a once-in-a-lifetime chance, I think, to see two amazing performers from the past before I was born.
Herbie Hancock and Wayne Shorter have occupied the forefront of great jazz for nearly 40 years. And throughout that time, they've maintained their creativity and their grace.
It's really beautiful. Very beautiful theater. Thank you very much for inviting Wayne and myself. Thank you.
This concert is special for more reasons than one. These rare birds don't land here often, and they don't usually travel as a pair. They're promoting their latest release, 1+1, a duet recording as beautiful as it is unconventional.
What's your name?
Even fellow musician Joni Mitchell is enough of a fan to make not only the show, but the cramped CD signing.
Oh, well, I gotta be here because I gotta sign. We got one coming.
1 + 1 is a thoughtful and passionate recording. Theirs is a sound that soothes the soul, a welcome glimpse into the musical minds of a couple of jazz masters.
You know what it signifies to me? The incomprehensibility of all this in life itself. And this music is like a reflection to me of that. It's elusive, and so are we.
But the truth of the matter is that the best way to understand many things in life and in music is allow oneself to experience the flow. In that experience, we begin to understand the true essence of what that thing is about.
Police in Ontario say they have broken up a Toronto area human trafficking ring exploiting people for labor. As Ellie Chiasson tells us, 64 people from Mexico were reportedly forced to work at farms, warehouses, and factories.
In early February, police executed search warrants of different properties in Toronto and the GTA. Investigators located dozens of workers who they say were lured to Canada.
Our members were shocked at the conditions that the victims were living in.
Described as squalid and cramped, some were in cold farmhouses. In total, 64 Mexican men and women were rescued.
They also described forms of coercion and control, which included isolation, a lack of freedom, being financially bound, threats, and sexual assault.
These workers are coerced with promises of a better life, decent wages, quality housing, and eventually documentation. These are almost always false promises.
Instead, they toiled in factories, warehouses, and on farms.
Fueron condiciones difíciles y duras, ambientes laborales.
CBC News spoke to a man who was a victim of this trafficking ring. He had responded to an online ad for work in Canada. Soon enough, he was working on a farm packing fruit while living in a house with 40 other people.
Realmente era algo difícil por la situación de que había mucha basura, había colchones solamente en los cuartos donde dormíamos hasta 2 por colchones individuales, donde pasábamos frío.
We've granted the man anonymity as he fears deportation. He managed to get out before the Project Norte raid, which resulted in the arrests of 5 people, 2 Canadians and 3 Mexicans. 2 suspects are outstanding. As for the workers or temporary foreign worker agencies that could also be implicated in this,
That part of the investigation is still being looked into. It has become a bit of a web, so just trying to unravel that web to really understand the full story.
the Canada Border Service Agency says the rescued workers do not face deportation as they are victims of a crime. Meanwhile, the man who escaped this human trafficking ring hopes that Project Norte becomes the catalyst for dismantling migrant worker exploitation.
Principalmente que tuvieran cuidado. Ahora sí que de estas personas que abusan de la necesidad del mexicano, ¿no? Y de un sueño canadiense, porque te prometen papeles, te prometen...
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
As we told you last night, Nordstrom is pulling out of Canada and taking 2,500 jobs with it. The U.S.-based luxury retailer calls it purely financial. But does it signal trouble ahead for other major department store chains in this country? Ethel Musa explores that tonight.
For some, Nordstrom's upcoming closure in Canada is still sinking in.
I heard that they were going to be closing all the Canadian stores, and I thought I should probably check them out again.
Not having one here is like a big loss.
The high-end U.S. department store arrived in 2014, but it says it never made money here.
They came to Canada with a fairly aggressive plan.
Nordstrom's failure is likely linked to not understanding the Canadian retail market, says this expert.
People are consuming luxury goods a little differently now. Instead of going to these big department stores like they used to, they're also going to the brand stores directly. Well, if you like Gucci, you don't need to go to Holt Renfrew or somewhere like that to get Gucci. You just go ahead and go to the Gucci store.
Some Canadian shoppers agree.
If I'm going to splurge on an item, it's part of the journey to go to the store. That makes sense.
For clothes and for banking, I like going to small areas, small places where they get to know you.
Experts also say the rise of discount stores and direct online sales pose new challenges.
I think the department store is on its last legs. In the U.S., the department store business has been under fire through everyone from J.C. Penney to Macy's. And in Canada, obviously, we've seen it under fire with Sears closing, Eaton's closing years ago, and the Bay starting to wind down stores.
Nordstrom stock took a plunge this year after weak holiday sales. Shuttering its Canadian stores appears to be part of the plan to get it back on track.
What companies do normally when they're under siege like this is they start to kind of jettison any assets they can. It's like a ship that's sinking a little bit. They throw things overboard.
The big question now is, what will fill the space in malls across the country left by Nordstrom's departure? Idil Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
Rising interest rates, as we know, are a hot topic in Canada right now. But the increases all seem to be on one side of the ledger, specifically what the banks are charging for loans. But as Nisha Patel explains, interest payments on your savings at those same banks remain extremely low.
Every time there's an interest rate hike, Canada's big banks respond predictably.
Mortgage rates seem to be changing almost instantaneously with the Bank of Canada announcements.
They're quick to raise interest rates on mortgages and loans, but slow to raise interest rates paid on savings accounts. At the big five banks, variable mortgage rates are at more than 5%, while a basic savings account earns just a fraction of 1%. Even a so-called high-interest savings account comes in at less than 2%. It wasn't always this way. Banks often used to adjust their savings rate the same week as the Bank of Canada rate decision. Back in 1979, customers' savings accounts could earn interest at a stunning 9.25%. Now it seems the past 15 years of record low interest rates have conditioned consumers to expect little.
I don't think that it's fair if you stop to think about it.
Well, I think they should raise the interest rate on savings accounts.
I don't really know if they have people's best interests in mind.
We asked the big five banks to explain. They insisted their rates are competitive and they offer many ways for customers to earn interest. GICs are paying out 5% if customers are willing to lock up their money.
What do you make of these interest rates on savings accounts?
So interest rates on savings accounts are definitely low. The concentration of the banking sector is quite high in Canada, and the Canadian households are not very likely to switch to another banks.
In the UK this month, lawmakers grilled bank CEOs on this very topic. In Australia, the consumer watchdog is investigating whether the banks are taking advantage. Here at home, experts say smaller banks or credit unions offer consumers an alternative, and shopping around could prompt the big banks to take notice.
Definitely look at moving your money as soon as possible, just to try and kind of emphasize and get those better rates for yourselves.
Because at a time of high inflation, every dollar counts. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
Workers at Indigo Books are staring at uncertainty after the company revealed personal data had been hacked. It kept the company's website down for weeks. But as Anis Hadari reports, the impact on the workers could last much longer.
Indigo workers are worried their personal information may be stolen.
It's various stages of worry. I'm trying to do as much as I can to protect myself, like canceling credit cards, changing like any possible password.
CBC News has agreed to keep victims' last names confidential to minimize risk.
It's definitely making me a little bit more scared, I guess, thinking about the future,
because this is something that will follow me potentially for the rest of my life.
In early February, Indigo's website went down. A cyber attack hit company systems. Weeks later, Indigo said current and former employee data was stolen too.
It takes a while to even tell me what of mine has been affected, how this affects me. Like, is it just Indigo going through something, or is it me personally?
Personal information, including bank account and social insurance numbers, was compromised and held for ransom by online criminals. Indigo refused to pay. This online post threatened to release the data publicly on Thursday, but it didn't show up when promised.
Like I say,
that doesn't mean the risk is gone.
You should always assume that the data has been compromised. We don't know. I mean, they are criminals after all. They are not obligated to do anything that they say they're going to do.
We have to look to our employers and ask, why? Why are you keeping this information?
Privacy experts say companies should delete what they don't actively need.
Companies very often say we will retain the information for as long as necessary for business purposes, or other vague language like that. In other words, it could be forever.
Indigo has said there's no indication its customers are at risk. The company bought 2 years of credit monitoring for some victims, but privacy experts say the risk of identity theft is much higher for the rest of their lives. Anis Haidari, CBC News, Calgary.
On the front lines of the war in Ukraine, Russia is inching closer to its first major victory since the earliest days of the invasion. Russian troops and mercenaries have been raining artillery on the last remaining access routes to the besieged city of Bakhmut. Russian mercenaries known as the Wagner Group say it was Ukrainian troops that destroyed this bridge in an effort to slow the Russian advance. The leader says Bakhmut is nearly surrounded. Ukrainian officials say the city has little strategic value, though the Russians see it as a stepping stone to capturing a larger section of the surrounding Donbass region. Both sides have taken heavy losses in that battle. The number of soldiers being killed in the fighting in Ukraine is vague at best. Neither side is providing precise figures. In Russia, there are strong suspicions the official casualty counts are so low they can't be believed. Briar Stewart has been talking with some groups and individuals working to reveal the true death toll.
When Vitaly Vatanovsky walks through crowded cemeteries filled with the graves of Russian fighters, the former Air Force officer stays silent. The images speak for themselves. They were healthy men who could contribute to the state, he says. They're lying in the ground now. Some headstones reveal soldiers as young as 19. I want people to understand the scale of the catastrophe we're now experiencing, which he believes the Russian government is hiding. Officials rarely issue updates. The last was in September when they said 6,000 had been killed. A group of Russian volunteers and journalists say they know the toll is much higher. They've created a database of the dead by combing through social media and obituaries.
In the last week, we had 15,000 confirmed deaths, and we believe that the real number is 2 or 3 times higher.
Maxim Litavrin says the database doesn't include the missing or any deaths they've been unable to confirm. He says so many Russians have been killed recently that they needed to find more volunteers to help. Even though the number of coffins keeps growing, Litavrin doesn't see a shift in the country's attitude towards the war.
For some reason, the Russian propaganda is working.
Karina Pronina admits she sometimes feels dismayed. This is one of the news pieces she put together in Buryatia, a region in eastern Siberia that's seen a disproportionate number of deaths. While trying to report, she was arrested at a cemetery. After being later warned that police were coming for her, Pronina fled Russia, but her work hasn't stopped. We're trying to do something. Our only weapon is to make things public, she says. And that's how Vatanovsky feels. He's been threatened and was even sent this picture from someone saying a grave was being prepared for him. But he says he has no plans to stop posting about what he's seeing in these cemeteries. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
Ancestry tests are a popular thing for many people, as well as pets. But is the science solid behind dog DNA tests? We have a marketplace story you'll want to see after this.
This is the largest annual rabbit show in North America, where over 17,000 rabbits and their owners gather for the glory of winning the title Best in Show.
Our community is huge, and a lot of people don't know that. You know, people, especially, they think of dog shows and horse shows and don't realize there's such a thing as rabbit shows.
Getting these little stars ready for their big moment in front of the judge is no easy task. These dryers started blowing at the crack of dawn. But for these rabbit lovers, it's all worth it.
It's an escape from the real world. The rabbit shows and all that is my hobby. It's how we relax.
There you go, yes.
A lot of us, we don't even know what these people do for work in real life, but we know they love rabbits.
My full-time job was an economics professor. And as you guys know, economics professor is sometimes a little bit boring. And Angora rabbits are so much more fun than economics.
All of these rabbits were bred for the limelight. Just like with horses and dogs, show rabbit bloodlines are poured over and tweaked, all in an attempt to rear a future Best in Show winner. And perfection does not come cheap.
These rabbits are not like the $25 pet rabbits you can buy at the feed store. Some of these are like $1,000, sometimes more. I saw one in an auction last year go for like $5,000. So people will pay a pretty penny for them.
But money does not guarantee you a place on the podium.
As far as our judging goes, it's all according to the American Rabbit Breeders Association Book of Standards. Each breed has its own set of standards, which is divided into points. The judge is looking for the best representation of that breed. It's very competitive, very specific.
Pretty good surface color from front to back. He's smaller in bones.
For me, the two biggest sticking points for me on her are, I just think she fails a little bit in body type. She's got tremendous width in the shoulder, but she's very flat. She doesn't get that nice general arch and roundness I'd like to see on her.
That's the lower hindquarters. He's not even in his finish.
Just a tremendously conditioned animal, beautiful butterfly.
One thing about our rabbit shows is you don't know whose animals belong to whom. There aren't handlers. So it's actually very fair. And that's one of the things I love about the rabbits. There's not the politics. This is a pure fancy, and you don't have to have $1 million or be a famous movie star who's a co-owner in a particular dog. You can be a backyard breeder who just puts in the work. You love your animals, and you can win Best in Show at the ARBA National Convention.
Land Back is a CBC original podcast where we uncover land theft in Canada and look at how Indigenous people are taking it all back. Land Back is out now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
That, if you can actually believe it, is a live shot of Toronto, where a snowstorm is bearing down on the province. As much as 30 centimeters of snow are set to hit the region. Already a number of flights out of Pearson are canceled as that GTA and beyond braces for what may be the strongest storm of the season. As much as 8 centimeters of snow is falling every hour. And yes, that is a live shot of Toronto. Someone who knows Ontario weather and all across the country, the weather meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe. So what do we get in our province?
Yeah, not quite what we're seeing in Ontario, but snow for both Vancouver and Toronto once again. It's been an unusual setup that the jet stream carrying storms through both sides of the country. Normally, we sort of see the opposite through BC and Ontario, but it's a very, very horizontal jet stream this week. Another difference with our snow, as I track out the snow tonight, taking you through the overnight into tomorrow morning, you see that purple lifts by Saturday afternoon. We do get a shot of showers, but we may see some sunny breaks in between. But the difference between our snow and what's happening across eastern half of the country is ours has really hardened. So it makes it slippery in the morning with our temperatures coming down to the freezing mark. That fresh snow we see overnight tonight will harden over the next couple of days once we see those temperatures dip down to the freezing mark, as they will for a few more days. I do see a warm up though. Let me get you through this latest swirling though. There it is, just sitting off our coast. By the time we hit Sunday, it's still bringing some showers in, possibly still some overnight flurries. It really doesn't disappear completely until midweek. Even Monday, you can see the possibility of some flurries across the south coast, all with that same swirling low. It really is a coastal story though. Look at the interior, seeing some flurries in Prince George. Temperatures below seasonal by a couple of degrees, 2 in through Williams Lake and the Kootenays. Lots of sunshine for you. Keep in mind, though, avalanche risk is considerable across the whole province, even without fresh storm snow. -5 up towards Dease Lake and a +5 for Prince Rupert. So it is an unsettled week ahead, but not quite as snowy as the week we're coming out of. Look for some hopeful sunny breaks over the weekend, but also some afternoon showers. It'll be a bit hit or miss. And again, notice those overnights coming down close to the freezing mark. So, Sunday into Monday, and then again Tuesday into Wednesday, we may see some flurries. Lots of showers in the mix. Again, it's really that swirling motion, hard to nail down the timing of anything, but it does also mean there's not a lot of anything until we hit Wednesday. That looks like a bigger system. And then Friday, rain, but look at that. Double digits. Haven't seen that in quite some time.
No. Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
Ancestry tests have gained major popularity in recent years, and now your canine can get in on the action if it wants to. But what is the solid science behind dog DNA tests? Marketplace host Travis Danraj reports.
Loki and Molly are lovable, yes, but also mystery mutts.
Now, what breed is Loki?
Our guess is some type of a terrier hound mix. We get asked a lot, so we don't know.
Dog DNA testing promises owners clarity on their canine's breed. We send swabs to 4 companies: DNA My Dog, Embark, Viagard Accumetrics, and Wisdom Panel. The cost from $80 to nearly $300. We also add a baseline, a purebred Great Dane named Quinn. Accumetrics asks us to submit a suspected breed, so we say Chihuahua to see if they're paying attention. Geneticist Eleanor Carlson warns the commercial industry is new and unregulated.
They have a vested interest in making sure that you are happy with the results of that test.
And those results are now in.
Ready?
Let's go.
But clarity isn't in the cards. Molly gets 4 completely different results from each of the 4 companies.
You're confusing. I'm confused.
The results for Loki are also all over the map.
Basically, the way the algorithm works is it's like, well, I didn't find a match, so I'm going to go find the next closest thing.
And remember, purebred Quinn, Wisdom Panel, and Embark agree she's a purebred. The 2 other companies offer very different results. One telling us that 52-kilogram Quinn is one of the smallest breeds. The companies all send us statements saying they stand by their science. Wisdom Panel adds their error rates are lower than industry standard, while Viagard Accumetrics says inaccuracies can happen due to cross-contamination during swabbing or shipping. Bottom line, say experts, when it comes to dog DNA tests, take them with a grain of salt, because the results could end up giving you pause. Get it? Travis Danraj, CBC News, Toronto.
Yeah, I get it, Travis. Good dog. You can catch the full Marketplace investigation tonight, including what results came back when Travis sent those companies his own DNA. You'll want to see this. 8 p.m. on CBC Television, 8:30 in Newfoundland, and you can watch it on CBC Gem. Not exactly a welcome house guest. A man came home to find his home broken into. Why police weren't the first person he called. After this.
And there you go. And you see it makes a mess, right? So there's the flake. And you can see on the sharp edges, don't work, anyway.
Is it that sharp?
Oh yeah. Oh, don't cut yourself. I am a professor of geology at the University of New Brunswick in St. John. And I am a researcher and also teach some geoarchaeology. What types of rock were used to make the stone tools that prehistoric people were using? And from that, well, where did they get those rocks? Then they removed another flake. Okay. So it wouldn't be a good knife, but I could use it to make a scraper or something. Once I've killed my deer and I've cut the hide off of it, and I want to scrape the gunk off, I don't actually want a really sharp thing. I want it sharp enough to scrape the gunk, but I don't want to slice the skin. So now I could scrape, scrape, scrape. These tools were from a collection that a collector in England put together in the early part of the 20th century. And they got shifted around from one person to another and eventually ended up here. So these are authentic stone tools, hand axes from England. So they would be about the same age as these guys here, 500 to 100,000 years ago. Neanderthals got away from using hand axes, which are big and clunky, and got into using flakes that they could shape into particular shapes. So I can tell that somebody made this tool by hitting a rock right there. It's got this bulgy bit here called the bulb of percussion, which is where, when the shock wave that knocked it off of its initial larger piece occurred, that passes through it like an S, a sine curve, sine wave. So that's the bulb of percussion. And then these smaller lines that you might see here, those are ripple marks, undulations. Those are the rest of the sine curve kind of diminishing as it travels through the core, which is the rock that this was removed from. So that right there is a sign of a deliberate blow. When you look at the back, there are multiple other scars where other flakes had been removed in a pattern. This way, this way, this way, this way. Nature doesn't do that. There's no organization of, I've removed flakes from this side, this side, this side, this side, and now I'm going to hit this and make that shape. Somebody did that on purpose. When we find things like that, we know that's not just a random rock. That's a stone tool.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
On March 29th, join Leanne Young at the Zilly Cares Conversation on Care, a mental health fundraiser with special guests Dr. Gabor Mate and Dr. Mariam Zainadin. Get your tickets at zillycare.com. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver inbox and keep connected with us.
A New Brunswick man spent a day cleaning up after an uninvited guest left his place in chaos. There was a smashed window, broken furniture, trail of blood up the stairs. Now, he was going to call the police, as one might do, but as we find out, he had to call someone else for help.
It's not unusual for us to see deer, coming, but they normally don't run into the house. The tracks are there coming over, and went through by this bush and come right in here, this area here, or the window. And when we got it out, that's the way it left, right there, the tracks area. These things are heavy, and they went through two of them. Like it was doubled, eh?
Surprised it could make it through those windows?
Yeah, I'm surprised he didn't break his neck, something like that. When I come in and seen the deer, it was over in the corner by the stove, and soon as I seen it, I didn't stay around. I knew I had to get the forestry people. So that's exactly what I did. And they come down, and the guy, he knew what he was doing, so he got the deer out with a big stick. And went from here into the bathroom. Then he had to get it out of there, and it went up the stairs. The forestry, they were surprised. It doesn't normally happen, but like I say, the guy knew what he was doing.
Well, when a good plan comes together, it made a mess, I'm not gonna lie.
By big stick, he means a broom. Still has to fix the window and figure out why the deer wanted to get into his basement. My bet is a bar, rumpus room, or a beanbag chair. I've also never seen a deer actually use a treadmill. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. A reminder, you can watch this program on CBC Gem. That's our free app. You can also catch us on YouTube, Facebook, and of course, online, cbc.ca/BC. Janella Hamilton will have your late local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Thanks for being with us this week. Take care.